I'll just kind of walk us through, and we're not very rigid here in terms of how we want to do things. One of the key features of you that you all share, again, your bookends in many ways in terms of the type of work you're doing and where it happens, how it happens, but certainly you share that common theme of interacting and collaborating in your research activities with external partners, be they industry, at times government, otherwise. Mike helps us with a lot of our military-related research as well. Talk to us a bit about that. How is that relevant? Is it becoming more relevant, and what are some of the things that's meant to you?
So, I mean, the intrinsic question, I guess, is industry partnership compatible with academic success? And I would say that that's not even the question. The question is whether or not we can succeed academically without industry partnerships today. And for a couple of reasons. In NIH funding world, what's the average age for the first time NIH grant recipient? 43, 45, somewhere around there. So I think when Roz came in, when Dave Brown came in, we had discussions about how do you bridge that gap between the time when you start and when you get that first grant. And I think the answer to that, in my mind, was industry partnerships. The nice thing about funding from industry is it can come very quickly. You have to understand it can go away very quickly. But it's that quick nature that really gives the advantage. NIH takes so long, federal funding of any sort takes so long to position yourself and to get, that you need something to bridge that gap. And that's how I got into it early on, is that I got to a place where I was on a hiatus between NIH grants. And I needed something to keep my lab busy. So somebody approached me about doing work with non-human primates, with monkeys. And we developed our models in mice, and they came and asked, would you be willing to try this in monkeys? And I said, sure. So I went up to the chairman's office. I sat down with Bob Bless and said, I just have this opportunity to start this work in monkeys. He says, you ever worked with a monkey? I said, no. He says, well, how are you going to take it when they reach out and slap you? I guess the same way I take it when a student reaches out and slaps me. So the point is that it immediately started a funding stream, right? And we were able to build from there and to use those monies, to kind of bridge the gap. And it's led to a whole lot more, and we'll go into that a little bit later.
Well, I like the way that you described us as having bookends, because I think that probably does provide a good point-counterpoint. I'm a scientist practitioner. I'm a clinical psychologist that functions in cardiology, so I take care of the psychologic side of living with heart disease. So on my daily basis, I see patients dealing with various problems, whether those be problems with medications, problems with a device, or problems with the disease, somehow in which the human person, the human factor of the disease, is trying to interact with these different technologies. So I identify problems on a regular basis, one patient at a time, if you will. But as a clinician, you see the same problem repeatedly. You start to say, is this a systemic problem? And if it is a systemic problem, let's say in the case of my work with implantable defibrillators, where patients need a device to identify and treat potentially life-threatening arrhythmias, but it does so with high-energy shock. So repeatedly, I see patients showing up looking terribly anxious after having received high-energy shocks from almost dying, and you say to yourself, this is a problem that I think other people probably care about. Oh, like maybe the people who make this device. And so you say to yourself, wait, I mean, I don't necessarily care to work or not work with industry, but I don't want to see any more human suffering that, frankly, I can look upstream and see where it's going to occur. Like, that's my job, is to forecast problems and come up with solutions for them. In short, novel technologies create novel problems. Even if they're a solution to a problem, they often have collateral new problems. And so innovation by itself within industry often creates a set of additional, call them problems, call them opportunities, call them puzzles. But that's how I started on this, was simply a shared desire to see better outcomes, reduce human suffering. Every one of us do that naturally. We don't go, I need to go find an industry partner. We say, I want to solve that problem. I want people to be able to encounter diseases, manage the disease, and be able to still do everything they always wanted to do. That's great care then. And so I was drawn to working with industry only because they shared the same passion to try to solve the problem. Now you could say, they got different motives than you. Better be careful, naive ivory tower professor. But actually, most of the time, they share the same goodwill. I mean, there maybe Wall Street worries about the nitty-gritty, but the people who are working in these companies trying to solve problems, they usually share the universal ideals of creating something that makes a difference for people. And when you can do that, when you can find a shared goal with industry that is also a shared clinical goal in my case, then you have a perfect kind of synergy.
So the one thing that I think you have to be careful of is that the goals probably the ultimate goal is going to be the same, but oftentimes we academics want to stay on a problem until we solve it. We want to understand it completely. Industry wants to get to a go, no-go answer and then move on. And that's the hard part for academics, I think. But I think I know Sam is right. In the end, you're both trying to get to the same place, and that is you're trying to get to ultimately to an answer to the problem. Our tendency is just to keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper until we understand it enough to bring up that answer. Theirs is more ping-pong-like in that we'll try this, get enough data to know whether this is the right direction. If it's not, let's try something else. And that's a little hard to get used to.
I actually think that that's a neat thing about working with industry, because it does make you more practical. You talked earlier about the speed, I call it the speed of business. You know, the speed of NIH is, well, I'll submit this grant and I'll hear back in 9 months. The speed of business is you can get your idea in the right place with the right people. They'll make a go, no-go decision on it in a short period of time. And so you kind of know, is that an avenue that at least industry thinks they're going? Because they're playing the same game you are. They're forecasting where do they think the market will go? What are the important solutions or products that patients, in the case of my work, will need? So we're both trying to forecast similar kinds of things. They're looking at disease trends, they're looking at epidemiology data, they're looking at all kinds of similar kinds of things. They do have different motives. I'm not trying to make them sound exactly the same. But interestingly, often we share more of the synergy than you would think. As long as we move beyond where I think some of the introductory comments were, Mike, about, hey, you got to have NIH grants or you're not an academic star. As long as we defeat that hypothesis and then say, you're an academic star when you solve problems. That's what you are. You solve problems. And that doesn't matter what discipline you're from or whether you went to a fancy school or not. It's about whether or not you solve problems. Can you create utility or value in your work? And honestly, that can be hard to do for academics sometimes, because we are dealing with often very pieces of the problem. We often don't have the big picture marketable outcome of research. Sometimes it's just some of the more elementary key elements that we can understand.
But the currencies can be very different.
Yes.
Right? So our currency is publications, grants, grant dollars, whatever, right? But publications are key to us. And I have yet to find a company that is not interested in publishing. That seems to be a fallacy that people
I agree, 100%.
Bring forward about industry. It's not true. They may not be willing to support a study long enough to get enough data to where we think it's worthy of a publication. That's a real concern. Right? So you'll end up doing a lot more abstracts and meeting presentations than you do publications out of industry work oftentimes. So I don't find industry work all the time to be good places for students to be working. It's good experience for them
Yeah.
to be involved, but it's unlikely that those projects are going to be good for dissertations or theses.
I want to